This will unlock the Ravens, and Jesse Minter just explained why this week could be one of the most important weeks of the Ravens preseason. Coming off of that dominant 24-7 win over Philly, but now the starters are getting involved. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, they're all about to get real work this upcoming week against the Vikings during these joint practices. And on that opposite side with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Kyler Murray, and Brian Flores on the defensive side waiting, this is going to be a completely different test for the Baltimore Ravens. So let's talk about what Jesse Minter saw during that game against Philadelphia, what he's expecting against Minnesota, and why these joint practices could really tell us a lot about the Baltimore Ravens heading into the regular season. But a quick PSA before we get into today's video, I would like to say that the Cincinnati Bengals Digest channel just hit 5.3K subscribers. If you are a diehard Baltimore Ravens fan, there's no way the Cincinnati Bengals channel should have more subscribers than the Baltimore Ravens channel. If you've been enjoying the daily content every single day, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It is completely free, no cost at all. And we love providing these daily Baltimore Ravens rumors, updates every single day. So make sure you hit the subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a Baltimore Ravens upload at all. But going back to Jesse Minter and talking about the outcome of the Baltimore Ravens preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles, he wasn't too focused on the actual score outcome for the Baltimore Ravens. He saw a lot of positives in terms of how they were operating the actual systems. He said he was not going to celebrate this victory too long, but he was reviewing the film and there were a bunch of things that stood out to him that weren't just touchdowns or sacks. It was how the team operated as a whole in pre-snap on both sides of the football. Baltimore was getting in and out of their plays consistently, making these run checks and communicating defensively and staying organized. And it was one of the biggest compliments he could give. He said we were never really up against the play clock, which was awesome for the Baltimore Ravens. And in this new coaching staff, new system, everything seems a bit fresh and new. It could get overlooked by fans, but the team is still learning how to move and operate at this sense. And Jesse Minter really wants his players to be comfortable enough to make these adjustments without everything falling apart on a play-to-play basis. And against Philadelphia, he really saw a lot of this and was very, very impressed on what he saw against Philadelphia. But on the defensive side of the ball, it also gave Jesse Minter's defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, a lot to like in terms of the defense and how they operated. Baltimore held Philadelphia to being 0 for 9 on third downs and only 159 yards of total yards with 6 first downs. And the Baltimore Ravens also had 3 sacks and forced 2 turnovers. And this is the exact performance from the Baltimore Ravens defense you want to see, especially when we know Kyle Hamilton and these other starters were not playing. But yes, there are some things that need to be cleaned up on the defensive side of the ball. Minter admitted that there were a couple plays that he wanted to see the quarterback contain better during these snaps. And it's very important that Jesse Minter doesn't let this one good preseason game make him believe that everything is perfect. The exact same thing with Anthony Weaver. The goal is not to look good in August. It is the preseason. We're trying to execute for February and make sure that we can move efficiently when these games actually count for the Baltimore Ravens. And now they're going to get a much bigger test against the Minnesota Vikings with these joint practices coming up for the team, because now it is really getting interesting. Minter had rested the starters against Philadelphia, but that is not happening this week at all. The Baltimore Ravens are traveling to Minnesota for joint practices on Wednesday and Thursday, followed by that afternoon preseason game against the Vikings. And during these joint practices, it is really a chance to see the Baltimore Ravens at that efficient state of getting those game juices flowing, going against these top-level players in that Viking system. And it is a great opportunity for players like Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Kyle Hamilton, Zay Flowers to get as close to actual week 1 reps as you can. And this is a very big deal for the Baltimore Ravens. But on the Minnesota Vikings defensive side, the biggest test for the Baltimore Ravens offense through joint practices and this first preseason game, as we know, is Brian Flores. Brian Flores on the defensive side of the ball, he has a reputation for bringing a ton of pressure towards quarterbacks, and it could affect Lamar Jackson and Declan Doyle. And Minter has praised Flores and says that he does a good job, better than any other defensive strategist in the entire league. And now they're going against a defense who's going to try to confuse them. Blitzing, defensive pass coverages, different types of pressures, and different looks beyond the snap, whether it is disguising these cover 4 formations and then switching to a cover 3, it is completely different. And this is the exact kind of environment that you can start to see when Lamar Jackson is trying to get comfortable within this new Declan Doyle system. And as we know, the Minnesota Vikings are a team that have some stars and have some pretty efficient guys on the opposite side of the ball in that receiver room. And it's all headlined by Jay Jettis, Justin Jefferson. But alongside him now, Jordan Addison, has started to really gain some elite traction. And this is an incredible test for the Baltimore Ravens secondary. Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, Chidobe Awuzie, TJ Tampa, Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks. They are going to have to deal with some of the better route runners and playmakers in the entire NFL. And this is why I'm actually excited about these joint practices more than the actual preseason game itself, because you're getting extended work against these number one guys. You can adjust on the fly. And instead of seeing the same players over and over and over, you're learning from that first team perspective and going against these first team receivers. It is very valuable to look at this rather than the final score of the preseason game that is upcoming. But regarding Jesse Minter and the Vikings, him and Kevin O'Connell, the coach of the Minnesota Vikings, have been working together to talk about how the practices are going to work and how they are going to affect the Baltimore Ravens in a great system. And now the Baltimore Ravens, off of these joint practices, both teams want to really come in, them and the Minnesota Vikings, better than when they arrived prior to the preseason games. And this is the point. Joint practices aren't about winning a joint practice. Minter said that Minnesota has been playing great and have great players, obviously, on both sides. And this really gives Baltimore a chance to get a lot of reps for their first team. And this is exactly what the Baltimore Ravens need right now going into the regular season. And now the preseason is shortened, so there's only 2 more games to decide before making those 53-man cuts. And the Baltimore Ravens still have a bunch of evaluating to do on the offensive and the defensive side of the ball. But staying with the defensive side of the ball, the Baltimore Ravens really received some great news involving Tedu Buchanan. And it is a really cool story because he suffered a season-ending ACL injury back in December, and Minter said that Buchanan has attacked rehab to the fullest extent, and now he is a constant presence in the building since he's arrived as a whole. But he passed his physical last week and returned to practice on Monday and is still doing that individual work on the side, and Minter gave him a lot of credit. This is major credit when it comes to attacking that rehab and being able to come back on the field better than you were before, post-injury. And it is really important for Buchanan to get back to his working ways, especially in that linebacker competition that is brewing for the Baltimore Ravens. And the fact that he's already back on the field after having an injury such as that in terms of your ACL, it is a really encouraging sign for the Baltimore Ravens. And we're really excited to see Tedu Buchanan go out there, be his healthy self, and be better than he has ever been before. And then there's Tyler Loop, the kicker for the Baltimore Ravens. As we know, Tyler Loop is not panicked, and Jesse Minter isn't panicking when it comes to that miss, the 49-yard field goal against Philadelphia. And honestly, I would say it's the right approach for the moment, keeping your confidence in your starting kicker. And he made a 42-yarder later in the game and hit all 3 of his extra points. But Minter pointed out something that was very interesting that we didn't know much about. He said that this was Loop's first time kicking at M&T Bank this summer, which isn't an overstatement I could say, but Saturday was essentially his first time kicking in the stadium and the new surface this entire offseason. And Jesse Minter said he feels really good about Tyler Loop and believes that he's had a really strong camp. And obviously the misses are not what you want to see, especially from a Baltimore Ravens fan perspective. But the Baltimore Ravens are going to keep giving him opportunities, and hopefully he can bounce back and be a proficient kicker for the Baltimore Ravens and get that miss from the Baltimore Ravens against the Steelers out of fans' heads for a long time. But when we talk about the Minnesota Vikings, the joint practices, the upcoming preseason game, what am I looking to see from the Minnesota Vikings defensive perspective that could affect the Baltimore Ravens? There are many things, but first on the offensive side of the ball, how does Lamar Jackson handle Brian Flores and the pressure packages that are being applied? Secondly, how does the Baltimore Ravens handle Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison through those joint practices? And third, the offensive line for the Baltimore Ravens, as we know, how are they going to communicate against a different defensive front? And the Brian Flores defense as a whole is a very dominant pass rushing threat and something that you must be aware of. And fourth, the younger players for the Baltimore Ravens have been starting to really separate themselves. Does Jacoby Lane continue to step up in that wide receiver 3 department? Is TJ Tampa going to continue to have these strong showings in the secondary side? And last but not least, the overall communication of the Baltimore Ravens is very key going into this game because Jesse Minter really cares about delivering these play calls and being effective on the offensive side of the ball, not having these pre-snap penalties and being an errant in this perspective. But the Baltimore Ravens, as we know, can consistently communicate and make these adjustments. And if they execute, it's going to be very interesting going into the preseason game and the joint practices through the back half of the week. And that's why I think the Baltimore Ravens and this week could really unlock the Baltimore Ravens. Philadelphia showed us what the Baltimore Ravens can look like when their younger players are stepping up. And Minnesota is going to show us what looks and things that they can bring to us in terms of getting those starters involved. Lamar Jackson gets to go against Brian Flores. He is a severely important defensive coordinator in the NFL. In the secondary, gets that test against Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and I'm very excited to see what happens going into the rest of the game. This is exactly what the Baltimore Ravens need going into the regular season. No more hype, no more excuses, just competition and developing those guys ahead of the 53-man roster cuts. That is going to be all for today's video. If you guys enjoyed the Baltimore Ravens Digest video, make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you never miss another Baltimore Ravens update. My name's Alassane, and I'll see you in the next one. And until then, Ravens flock always.